External identities in Microsoft Entra are one of those topics that sound simple at first. Invite an external user and move on. But there's a lot more to it than that. In reality, external identities are all about how you let people outside your organization collaborate with your resources while still controlling how they authenticate, what they can see, and what security requirements they have to meet before access is granted. So in this video, I'm going to show you not just what external identities are, but how to actually manage them in Entra, how to invite guest users, how to lock things down, and where features like security defaults, identity providers, and cross-tenant access fit into the picture. At the core of this topic is B2B collaboration. That means users outside your organization accessing resources in your tenant using identities they already have, instead of you creating an internal employee account for them. That's one of the big ideas here. The user is external, but the access is still your responsibility. When you invite someone in this model, they're typically represented in your directory as a guest user object, often with that familiar ext in their user principal name. Microsoft documents that invited B2B users are added with the user type set to guest, and the invitation never expires. So even though external collaborators use their own credentials, they can still be managed just like an employee, with administrators controlling things like groups, permissions, and even licenses. This is the area we're really focused on. External identities is where you control how guest collaboration works in your tenant. And this is where I want to go beyond a simple tour. I'm not just trying to show you where the menu is. I want to show you what matters here from an admin perspective. Who can invite guests? What restrictions apply to them? What identity sources can be trusted? And what security guardrails you can put in place. One of the first settings I would review in a real tenant is who can invite guests. This matters because the default is more permissive than a lot of admins would expect. Microsoft's guidance says that by default, all users in your organization, including B2B Collaboration users, can invite external users to B2B Collaboration unless you limit that behavior. That's a really important practical point. If you inherit a tenant and no one has reviewed this setting, guest invitations may already be more open than your organization intended. So right here, let me explain the options. You can allow broader invitation behavior, or you can restrict this so only specific admin roles can invite guests. There's also a guest inviter role, which is worth knowing because it gives you a way to delegate guest invitation rights without handing out heavier admin access. This is one of those areas where convenience is the default, but intentional control is the better admin move. Let's move on to looking at how guest users are treated differently from internal members by default. Guests are not supposed to behave like normal employees in your directory. By default, guests are blocked from broadly listing users, groups, or other directory resources, although they may still be able to see attributes of non-hidden groups. This is an important distinction because it shows that guest is not just a label. It affects the default experience and the default exposure of directory information. So if somebody is brand new to Entra external identities, this is one of the first things I want them to understand. You are not simply creating a normal account for an external user. You are creating a governed external collaboration object. Another very practical control here is the ability to allow or block collaboration by domain. This is the kind of setting that actually helps in real-world environments. Maybe your organization only wants to collaborate with approved partner domains. Or maybe you want to block known consumer or untrusted domains from being invited through this process. You can configure an allow list or a block list, but not both at the same time. Only one list is used per organization, and these settings are independent from the SharePoint and OneDrive allow block lists. Also, they don't retroactively affect users who already accepted invitations. They apply moving forward after the policy is enabled. That's a very useful admin takeaway because it means turning this on doesn't magically clean up yesterday's guest population. Now let's do the actual guest invitation. I'm going to go into Users, then All Users, and then choose Invite External User. Microsoft's current Quick Start for guest invitations uses this exact portal path, and this is the standard admin flow for inviting external users in the Entra portal. Here, I'll enter the external email address, display name, and then send the invitation. As I do this, I want to make one point really clear. This is not just sending an email. This is creating a guest object in my tenant that I can manage afterward. Microsoft also notes that guest users can be invited directly to the directory, to a group, or to an application, which is good context if you want to tailor onboarding to the access they actually need. Now that the guest is created, I want to inspect the object itself. Right here, you should see that the user type is set to guest. In many cases, you'll also see the ext naming pattern in the user principal name. This is one of the easiest ways to recognize a classic B2B collaboration guest in Entra. This is also where the topic becomes more practical and less theoretical. This object is now in my directory. That means I can govern it. I can review properties, group memberships, assignments, and apply policies to it. The next question is, how does this guest actually authenticate? This is where the bring your own identity comes into play. Entra may recognize that the guest already belongs to a managed Entra tenant, or has a Microsoft account, or has a Google identity, or another supported federated identity provider. If none of these fit, email one-time passcode can be used as a fallback. That matters because guest access is not always the same experience for every external user. The identity they already have affects how redemption and sign-in happen. I also want to briefly show identity providers, because this is one of those areas that people often see in the menu but skip over. This section matters because it expands the kinds of external identities your tenant can work with. I don't want to get into too much detail here. We'll probably make a whole separate video on federated identities alone, but I do want to note that setting up a federation does not automatically change the authentication method for users who already redeemed invitations unless that redemption status is reset. For this video, I'm intentionally keeping this part light. I don't want to turn this into a federation deep dive. The main practical takeaway is just this. If you need more than the default identity guest paths, this is where that conversation starts. Now we move from collaboration into governance. One of the cleanest ways to add governance for guests is terms of use. You'll find terms of use under external identities. You'll also want to set up things like a global privacy contact and set up an organization privacy statement. This is useful because it allows you to require an external user to acknowledge organizational requirements before they're granted access. This is probably the most important admin-focused section of this whole video, applying conditional access. So let's build one now. I'll create a new conditional access policy. For users, I'll choose all external users and guests. For target resources, I'll choose all cloud apps. And under grant, I'll require multi-factor authentication. If I've already configured terms of use, I can require that here too. This is what separates a basic explanation from something actionable. It's not enough to know external identities exist. You need to know how to put real conditions around external access. Anyone can invite a guest. A good admin controls the conditions under which that guest is allowed in. Once again, even though this is an external user, that does not mean unmanaged. Guests can still be managed similarly to internal members. They can be assigned collaboration rights, app access, and in some cases licenses, depending on the scenario. That is worth showing visually because it reinforces the key distinction. Guest means external relationship to the organization, no lack of administrative control. Now let's add one feature that makes this more scalable: dynamic groups. If you're only ever handling one guest at a time, manual assignment is fine. But if you want a cleaner operating model, dynamic grouping becomes much more interesting. Microsoft states that Microsoft Entra Premium P1 or P2 licensing is required to create and manage a dynamic group. The real value of dynamic groups is this. Instead of individually managing external users forever, you can create rules that help place identities into the right containers automatically based on attributes. That's the kind of thing that actually saves time and improves consistency in a real environment. I also want to briefly mention cross-tenant access, because it's related, but it is not the same thing as the classic guest invitation flow we just walked through. Microsoft describes cross-tenant access settings as the place where you manage B2B collaboration and B2B direct connect with external Microsoft Entra organizations. Here's the distinction. Cross-tenant access settings manage inbound and outbound settings, while B2B direct connect is more of a mutual trust model between two Entra organizations. Both organizations may need to allow the relationship, and this is commonly associated with more seamless access scenarios like Teams shared channels. Microsoft's current documentation on B2B Direct Connect also highlights that it enables seamless sign-in to shared resources, especially for Teams shared channel scenarios. Teams documentation confirms that shared channels with external participants require cross-tenant access configuration on both sides. We can cover this more in a separate video. For now, the takeaway is B2B collaboration is your classic guest model. B2B Direct Connect is more about cross-tenant trust and seamless collaboration between Entra organizations. So that's the real shape of external identities in Microsoft Entra. Yes, it includes guest invitations, but more importantly, it includes the admin controls around who can invite, what restrictions apply to guests, which identity paths are supported, and what security conditions external users must satisfy before they're allowed access. That's the part I think gets missed in a lot of these walkthroughs. It's easy to show a screenshot of the page. It's more useful to understand how the feature actually fits into secure administration. If you want, I can make follow-up videos that go deeper into federation, dynamic groups, or cross-tenant access policy design. But for this one, the key takeaway: external identities are not just about inviting outside users. They're about governing external access as well.